It's really a pleasure to be here, and I'm so glad that Mark is here together, and we have hopefully will be a good evening for you, and we definitely want to hear any thoughts and questions that you'll have as things go along. So yeah, so do you want to
Okay, I'm Mark Israel. I was introduced as North Potomac. That's a habit of the post office. When I first moved to Quarry Mill Road 45 years ago, believe it, I was in Gaithersburg, and then I didn't move, but Gaithersburg became North Potomac, and North Potomac is sort of a fiction, and the place that has a name that's nearest is Darnestown. You certainly know of Darnestown. My farm is named Quarry Mill Farm. Where did it get that name? Because it's located on Quarry Mill Road. Where did the name Quarry Mill Road come from? You know, there are a lot of mill roads around Montgomery County. When I first moved here, there was a couple lived in a log cabin, literally, on the far side of Quarry Mill Road up the hill. And I got to know them. And I asked them, where did the name Quarry Mill come from? They said, oh, it was John Quarry's mill. He had a mill down in Muddy Branch. Muddy Branch crosses right there. I said, oh, that's interesting. They said, yeah. And you can see his headstone, if you know where to look, up on the top of the hill on Esworthy Road. So I took my young son, and we fought our way through the brambles and the wild rose, and there was a headstone like this up there, and it said, John Quarry died in 1796. That man saw the American Revolution.
Wow.
And we still maintain this road. I have some parts of his mill that we fished out of Quarry Mill that are sitting in front of the house, and the driveway has a circle, great big metal ring there. Of course, the whole area was different when I came 45 years ago. There weren't very many houses around, very gradually. I remember when I looked at the house and the land, I hardly looked inside the house. I looked at the ground and I said, gee, that'll be a nice place for melons. And let's see, corn can go over here. And that's the way I was thinking about it. So I started to farm. I started out using what we think of today as conventional agricultural techniques. That's before organic. The reason I farmed conventionally is that I learned some things from my father, who studied agriculture at Purdue University in the 19-teens, and there was nothing but conventional agriculture at that time. So I use those techniques, which include persistent pesticides and chemically derived fertilizer and a lot of things we don't even think of today. And then I read a book by a writer named Robert Rodale. The name of that book was Organic Gardening and Farming, and it introduced the word to the concept of organic gardening, and I bought it. I accepted it, and I changed all of the procedures. The essence of organic, to my mind, is what you don't do. You don't use poisonous, persistent pesticides. You don't use a fertilizer that's made of oil and natural gas. You don't overtill, and you try to maintain the value of the soil and the surrounding environment. And I farmed, the whole land under cultivation is about an acre. And it's very interesting. The house is on top of a hill like this, and there's a south slope. There's the western part of the area, which is level, and there's the north slope. And I had 3 different climates to farm in. A south-facing land here has the climate of North Carolina. The westland was level, so it has the climate of Montgomery County, Maryland. North sloping field has the climate of southern New York State. which that was very, very interesting all the time. There's very little difference in the midsummer from June, July, and August, but in the early and late months, there's a great deal of difference. When the sun hits the south slope, my son, who knows about these things, told me the rays don't bounce off, they go in. When the sun hits the north slope, they bounce off and keep going. And of course, all the cold winds come from the north, so they hit the north slope. Seriously. For a time there, it was quite a big farm. Went to 3 farmers markets a week, one in Rockville, Maryland, one in Potomac, Maryland, and one back then on the grounds of the National Institute of Health. And you can tell how long ago that was, because that was before the whole security apparatus was put in. There was open grass and several farmers came and set up and sold there. And at the same time, I had a fairly small number of CSA members. CSA is what we're here to talk about tonight. Community supported agriculture. In a CSA program, the member pays for the whole year of food at the beginning of the year, March, February, April. And the theory is farmers don't have any income at that time of year. They have only expenses. They're buying seed, they're fixing equipment, they're buying fertilizer. And then the member gets every week a bag or a box of as much food as they paid for. And in my case, I've always said a whole share is $20 a week, half share is $10 a week. And as time went on, we dropped the 2 smaller markets in Potomac and at NIH and focused just on the city of Rockville. Ran a really good market. I made friends there with several farmers from Poolesville. Let me mention names, see if you know. Renee Spates. There's a Spates Road as you come in on Fishers Avenue. And she was a good partner and a friend at the markets. And then there was a big family. The main man was Jack Yates, beautiful man, and his son was Mike. And we were neighbors at the Rockville market for a couple of years, and I loved working with them. You didn't have to worry, did I bring enough bags? Did I bring enough this? Because whatever you didn't have, they had. And whatever they didn't have, we'd have. And that was good. Then I learned about a new theory of agriculture. It goes beyond organic. It's called regenerative. The main teacher of regenerative farming around here is a man named Nick Marivelle, who you might have heard of. And I literally studied under Nick. The idea of regenerative agriculture, in contrast to organic, where you do no harm, regenerative, you try to improve the land, the environment around the environment for all those many living things that live in the garden. It's just amazing. And to get things in better condition than they were, it involves using a lot more compost in the soil. You want to improve the soil. It involves less tilling. I'm sure you know what tilling is. There are these machines, so the tines turn like this and they turn up the soil. And I did an awful lot of tilling over the years. And then you learn that what tilling does is take the weed seeds and spread them all around. And the weed seeds, I've never seen a weed seed. I don't know if you've ever seen a weed seed. They're as invisible as the Covis thing is. You never see them. And there's something called the structure of the soil. Soil that stays in place for a while develops its own structure. the tiller breaks that up. I currently own 4 tillers, one of which works. And I was wondering, is it really going to work? Because it's a little bit doubtful. So I sort of looked around just this winter in kind of a panic. Where can I buy a tiller? It's very difficult to buy a tiller these days. The big places like Lowe's used to have them on the floor. They don't have them on the floor. There are a couple of catalogs where you see one tiller, one kind of tiller, and they ship it by over-the-road truck, and an over-the-road truck can't get into the driveway of a lot of these small farms, including mine. But thank goodness one of the tillers started working. Every time I pull the cord, I say a little wish, let's go. When it fires, I'm so happy. So I'm working now on this, the idea of regenerative. The question that was asked is, what do we plant now? But let me say a word about this community farm share program that I learned about. It was 4 months ago. The idea of community farm share is that donors give money to the organization, which what? The what?
Do you want me to jump in and talk about that, or do you want you keep going?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I've talked for a while.
No. Okay. If you want to go, okay. But I can jump in. I just wanted to jump in and say a little bit about just kind of our connection and a little bit on my history too, and how we're sitting here today, and all of that, make a little bit of sense out of that for you. So I just moved out here about 5 years ago now, and just completely loved it. I think my whole dream was to be out on a little farm someday. I mean, literally ever since I was 9 years old, I was like, I'm going to grow up and be a farmer. And I did a circuitous route. I was overseas for a while. I did microfinance work and international development work. But then coming back here just felt like a real big home, and I'm really grateful for that to be here. So then, so I moved out, then a couple of years spent to just get the place going, a lot of work, just hard labor and, fixing up fences and just, wow, I can't even begin to think of it all. And then I started to sort of emerge and look around and see what all is in Poolesville and what's around here. And then COVID hit. And it was during that time that, it's just, well, for all of us and for so many of us, I know it was a very similar story. It's like, well, what do you do? Do you sort of hunker down? Do you go out and figure out what can we do? Or some combination of that question of how do we process everything that's happening during that strange year that we had? And so because of the wonderful connections in Poolesville and these just super amazing people that I'd started to meet and friends, I'd started talking with some of them, and we'd sit around on each other's porches outside, social distance. And so we called ourselves like the porchers. So the porchers would get together every once in a while. And then I realized, I'm starting to make friends with these farmers. I know farmers. And then there's all the issues with the food insecurity. I'd spent time at the Black Rock Center, which is the up-county hub that turned itself pretty much overnight from an art center into a food hub. And over the summer, I volunteered there, and then I had a short little job there, packing up boxes and getting food from point A to point B where it needed to go. And and then going back to my porcher friends, we just started thinking like, well, can't we do something here, right? Can't we kind of connect with the farmers, connect with the people that are experiencing food insecurity, many of them for the first time ever. And how can we do that? And several people were saying, well, there are many people who might want to contribute to that. So that's how Community Farm Share got started. And I connected out with, there's 7 different farmers in the program, and Mark's one of them. So we just met a few months ago, really. I mean, back at the end of last year, I guess it was, as one of the farmers, to see, is there that way that we can basically get these CSA shares that Mark perfectly described to families that are experiencing food insecurity. So that's what Community Farm Share is all about. Now, did you want to jump back in? I just wanted to give the little background there.
Let me say a little bit about the position of Community Farm Shares. It is not at all to supplant the existing food assistance programs in Montgomery County, which do an excellent job. But there was a crisis that developed as a result, I call it the plague, an immediate crisis, and it's a different approach. And the genius of it is it helps the people that have the paid for shares, and it also helps the local farmers, small farmers. What I've learned is that there is a very great, strong degree of interest in people learning how to do small local food for here, food right here. So much of the food that's grown in the ag reserve is the basic commodities, and it's shipped out of the county to food factories somewhere. I don't even know where they are. What we in the food assistance world came to understand worldwide a long time ago is that there's no shortage of food in the world. There's a shortage of money. Hunger, food insecurity is caused by poverty. And poverty in the county shot up when people lost their jobs, obviously. And we can't do very much about the money question or the jobs question, but we can do something about the food question and getting food to the people. And that's what we're trying to do in Community Farm Share. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about the history of federal food assistance programs, because I was involved in that. And it makes some very good stories, and it makes some things very clear, unless you want to say something for right now. Coming out of the Second World War, I bet you all know this, the United States was the only advanced economy in the world, and we thrived. And it was a fat city for 10 or 15 years into the 1950s. Then another man wrote another book. The man's name was Michael Harrington, and he wrote a book called The Other America. And he described poverty in America in pockets, but widespread in an era where things were going good, were going strong. I met Michael Harrington at college, and he persuaded me to go in that field. Now, I was working in the anti-poverty program. And when the federal government became aware of the existence of poverty in the country, the first thing that they did was absolutely brilliant. They set up community health centers, outpatient health centers in the Delta of Mississippi, in the south end of Boston, in the mountain valleys in Colorado, in the areas where poverty was the worst. And that was so brilliant because you get public support for health programs. You don't get resistance. And the community health centers operated for a few years. And then the appropriate committee in the Senate of the United States, we were now in the very late 50s, early in the 60s, held a hearing. And they called in the doctors from Clarksdale, Mississippi, and Alamosa, Colorado, and they said, tell us what your experience is working with these impoverished populations. And the docs all said the same thing. Senators, our patients are starving. They are suffering from nutritional diseases. And there's an image that I'll remember always, and I would like you to remember. It was Senator Bobby Kennedy. He stood up in his chair, I don't know if you can see me, and he went like this, said, let's get some food down there. And that was really the beginning of this, what is now an enormous federal assistance program of food assistance. The food stamp program started up there. The anti-poverty program that I was working with was called appropriately Emergency Food and Medical Services. They gave us a little bit of money, and our job was to teach people how to use food stamps, how to get food stamps. And then the question arose of hunger among seniors. And the idea came up, shouldn't there be a specific earmarked program for senior nutrition? And I remember this so vividly. It was the Nixon administration at that time. They wanted our agency to set up a pilot program of senior nutrition. There was a lot of resistance to the idea because what was needed was not a pilot program, but an across the board fully funded program. And they thought you set up a pilot and you waste a lot of time and it doesn't really do any good. Well, that point of view carried the day. And the Meals on Wheels and senior nutrition was started up just about at the same time that the government created the area agencies on aging for community organizing among senior populations. Those programs are all still in business. One difference between the CSA concept and community farm share, where CSA is assisted, is the quality of the food. With CSA, the beneficiary gets food right from the field and it goes straight to the table. For years and years and years, there were federal surplus commodities distributed at food banks to people. To be honest, that wasn't very good food. It was whatever was in surplus. If there was too much corn, you got corn. If there was too much whatever, that's what you got. But we believe that there's something really special about reducing the trip from the field to the table. And my customers, most of my customers have been members for a long time and we're good friends. They tell me, we hate to go to the store. It's the best food we've ever eaten.
Good, perfect. I want to jump into this, and you were talking about the federal programs and not just federal programs, but even like I wanted to bring up something that the county did, Montgomery County did. Apparently I've been going, I'm not the expert on it, so I just want to share what I know, but the county, even before COVID, but definitely during COVID, they reorganized and got started a fantastic program, which is called the Farm to Food Bank program. And that program, I'm gonna mess up probably on exactly how the funding works, but basically county money somehow or other comes in and they're connected with MANA, and MANA, when I say connected, I think, and MANA is the administrator for the program. And it's a fantastic program because they're actually able to buy produce from our local farmers. So there's, I want to say 22 farmers that have already signed up for the program. This is last year. They sold product basically to the county. The county buys it at between wholesale and retail price, which is good. I mean, it's not as high as it can be, but it's definitely it's a good price for the farmers, which is so important. And then ends up through MANA getting distributed to some of the food banks. So it's a fantastic program, and I like the way I see the community farm share fitting in. It's like we're kind of the little ones that like one family is getting the food every week, whereas the bigger program with the county, which is really a fantastic program, that's on a bigger scale and getting food to maybe more people in more ways than this. So, but it's a nice collaboration. So it's a good connection. I just wanted to do a shout out for that because I do think that the Farm to Food Bank program, and not only did they support the farmers by buying their product, they also had some grant programs, and farmers were able to apply for critical grants that they otherwise really wouldn't have had access to, because they're expensive, like whether it was cold storage on the farm. That was one of the issues too, especially when, as we all saw in the news during COVID, so much on the bigger scale. I don't know how much it happened in Montgomery County, but we saw these images on the news nationally where food, perfectly wonderful food, is getting trashed and farmers were plowing under their fields. So somehow, after that started happening, it was critical that the county figured out how to, you know, basically figure out the redistribution of the food as soon as they could. And I think they did a pretty good job with that. So it's neat. So anyway, farmers could apply for grant funding for different projects, different equipment that they needed. So I think it's a neat time right now. I mean, this is my hope, you know, coming out of COVID, and myself, you know, being new into the whole farming food insecurity, only a few years of this. But my hope is that on the big picture, that there's a big change happening now, that there is, especially in the county. I want to talk about the Montgomery County, because I do think we have such an asset here. Of course, there's the Ag Reserve where we are, and beyond that, so much of this land, if we can, you know, just figure out the logistics of it and incentives, which include incentives, like can the county, can private, you know, organizations or nonprofits help to support farmers and to incentivize them to be able to grow table crop farm vegetables and fruit. So that's I think that I think it's a great time. I think there is incentive. There's a lot of people that are supportive of it now, and it's a matter of continuing the momentum, I guess, because I feel like there's a lot of energy for growing our local vegetables. Like right here, we can do it, you know, so.
Let me support and emphasize what you just said. Montgomery County is a largely urban county. It's the biggest county in the state, but an awful lot of food is grown in this county. And what you can feel if you're in the field is there's an awful lot of interest in new people getting into the business. Let me just mention, CSA was a perfect program for the height of the COVID plague, because there need be no interaction between the customer and the farmer. The farmer leaves a bag in front of the house, and an hour later the bag is picked up. And the CSA program has grown a lot from that. The other thing of interest in this field is that the seed companies were overwhelmed last year and this year. I had a hard time getting seed. They sold out. So many people in this country are thinking, well, I'm not going to starve to death. I'm going to grow some food in my backyard. Americans were smart enough to figure that out. The only trouble is they don't know how to do it. So but it was absolutely remarkable what happened to the seed companies. You had a terrible time getting certain kinds of food this year. All of this, in my view, is to the good. Mm-hmm. I've over the years, I've had a fair large number of young people work at the farm part-time. Most of them are from mid-county and down county, and you won't believe this. They never heard of the Ag Reserve. I would mention the Ag Reserve in passing, and they would say, what's that? In its wisdom, the county finally put up a few signs on some of the roads, but not every. You could drive out here and have no idea that this is an intentionally preserved area.
Yeah. So okay. So I think where were we? I lost track of my thoughts. Sorry. Oh, okay. One thing I also just wanted to bring up too is because you were talking about the seeds, so that was what jarred my thoughts. And people starting to grow a lot more food. So again, back to the Poolesville community that we are a part of, which is so wonderful. There's another program, which I'm going to give another shout out to, Sustainable Barnesville, which is connected with the Plant an Extra Row program. And so, and I'm all excited to volunteer with them too. So they did it last year. They started it last year with out of the pandemic. Like a lot of things good things actually have gotten started out of that pandemic. And it's basically just whatever gardeners, so not necessarily the farmers, but the gardeners who have their own backyard garden vegetables. If you have any surplus, you can put it into the basically the Plant an Extra Row program, and people would pick it up and deliver it, get it to WAMCO mainly, or other food assistance providers if they were needing stuff. And so this year, same thing. So we're still collecting backyard vegetables for anybody who has any extras, and the same thing, it can be dropped off at WAMCO like usual, or we also, thanks to locals at Sandy and Dave, who are just phenomenal. I'm sure you guys all know them. They this year just started there's a community cold shed right there at locals. It's just behind, well, it's next to the bakery. Then there's like what's going to be the grill and like the pizza oven place. And then in that little building is a community cold shed. So basically here, again, everybody can just drop off extra vegetables. And me and a bunch of other volunteers will go there, every day, sort through it and bring it to, call Katie, see what she needs at OneCo and bring it wherever it needs to go. So just another shout out to the community of coming together. And for those of us who had seeds, we can plant them still, and get stuff, get more food to people who need it too. So, and I want to point out too, like we talked about with Montgomery County, how, on the one hand, we're one of the most wealthy counties in the country, right? But there were, I'm not sure, but back in January was the last time I saw the statistic, or maybe it was February, but it was 100,000 people are considered food insecure. And that was a shocking number to me when I saw that. It's just 100,000 people literally don't know where their next meal is going to come from, or feel that they don't have the resources to be able to get those meals. And it's huge. And so, I started researching a bit more about that. What does that mean? Like what does that actually mean to wake up in the morning and feel like you don't have enough food, or you don't have access to it? It obviously bad, but the consequences then are so long, long term, whether you have to make these decisions, right? Whether you're paying your rent or your groceries, or, or your kids getting the right nutritional value that they need. And then the stress of it all. It goes on and on between your health problems, the mental health problems that happen because of this. And it's amazing when you think about that we can come together and on a county level, on a farmer level, on a backyard gardener level, on so many levels. It is possible to, and so many people have stepped up. So I'm just happy to be part of that.
Let me mention another real benefit of this whole business. I've had a lot of people work with me, mostly young people, because it's not been a big enough farm that I can pay a whole lot of money, and it'll be a part-time job out of high school, and I will teach them. And it is so interesting to me when they first come, how unaware they are of the natural world around them. And let me just mention, the workers I've had from Poolesville are very different in that regard. They're much, much more sophisticated. And I try the concept I use, I try to teach people to see what they look at. I want you to see the difference between this weed and this vegetable.
Yeah.
And they'll look at it and say, I don't see any difference.
You should.
I want you to look again and see that. It's so much a matter of not just looking at the world, but seeing it and seeing what's going on. I've had a few cases of exceptional, marvelous, superb success. I remember there was one young fellow who worked with me all summer. And I want to show them to understand the difference in where the sun is in different times of year. But between December and June, the difference from the sunset to the sunset is like this. It's a great big difference. And I remember we got into September and there was a big heat wave. And this young fellow said, for where the sun is in the sky, something's wrong. It doesn't feel like it should feel when the sun is at that point. And I realized that I made him understand that. I've also had some young people who go on and go into farming on their own, and they say, gee, I learned this from Mark, and I remember Mark told me how to this. There's one fellow who went into roof farming, if you can imagine. Can you? It's a considerable business. Think how much land there is on flat roofs in the cities. And Christoph said, Mark tried to teach us the timing of planting, and I wished I had paid more attention because the timing is so important. And this time of year, when you're thinking certain things have to get in the ground pretty soon or they're not going to make. And the only trouble with that is it interferes with sleeping when you worry about that. How am I going to get all the peas planted in time? It doesn't do any good at all to plant peas in May. Doesn't do any good. Nothing. You get no pea out of that. Are we getting questions built up? Love
You
to
can
hear.
open up for questions. My first question would be, what would your advice be for someone who's looking to start their own small scale farm? Like, what are your biggest tips for success?
You want me to start, or you want to start?
The biggest issue in Montgomery County, this is not universal, is land. You have to get a little piece of land, and land is very expensive. That's the real beauty of the Land Lick program that the Montgomery Countryside Alliance is having people. I have a whole, what I call my North Field that I'm not able to plant anymore. And I'm putting out the word. You want to learn about farming? Here's a field with a deer fence around it, water that comes into it, and I'll teach you how to do it at the same time. It's not easy. It's not a simple enterprise. The complications are enormous. Farmers, if I may offer, are not dumb rednecks. A successful farmer knows an awful lot of things. It's incredible how much you have to know. You have to know seed varieties. You have to know when to plant the seed varieties. You have to know where to get those seeds. You have to know how to water them. There are plants that grow better next to one another and do better apart from one another. You have to know all that material. That's why the big loser this time of year is sleep.
Yeah, let me jump in too. I mean, just so again, I'm like a fake farmer, so I'm a gardener, but I'm talking with a lot of the farmers. I've heard a bunch of things. So yes, land, absolutely. If you want to buy it, if you want to rent land, it's not bad. I mean, through the, like Mark said, the Land Link program. I mean, I think people can rent land for like, you know, what is it, $100 an acre a year or something, just ridiculously cheap. So I think that's possible, but apart from that, then there's all inputs, you know, so whether if you're going to start on the bigger side, you have to get the tractor, you got to get the deer fencing, you know, so get the land fixed. You probably need a lot of inputs on compost and soil amendments and stuff. But it's not, although it's hard, I mean, I just encourage so many people to try, because there's a great community of farmers who I think are also supportive of new people. And the county also, again, I'm gonna wish I were more of an expert on it, but the county does have a lot of programs for supporting new farmers, especially if it's farmers, women or farmers of color. And I think there are other different programs for new farmers. There's also an organization called Future Harvest Casa, which is fantastic. They have a really neat new farmer training program. I think it's even free or very cheap. So it's very accessible to people, and you can join it and you get a lot of just kind of classroom training, but also mentorship work with other real farms to actually learn more in practice. So there's a lot of, I mean, it's absolutely true that there's a lot of knowledge in there, and it is not easy. You don't just stick seeds to the ground and think you're gonna grow something, but there's also a lot of support, both the financial support and the educational support and the community support from other farmers.
And one other institution, the University of Maryland.
Yeah,
has very good outreach.
Yes. And the Office of Ag is, you know, Jeremy, Chris, and others in the Office of Ag are super supportive of new farmers. So I think the county, again, going back to what we said before, there's so much incentive, like, let's do this, let's come together and create a more vibrant agriculture community. I think there's a really strong push for that. So for people to get started, just start connecting with people.
It also helps a lot to have parents who had a garden when you were growing up. When I started out, how did my father do this? And I do some things now that might be idiosyncratic or a little bit strange, and people will say, "Why do you do it this way?" Well, I said my father did this way. So with in respect to him, I'm going to plant black seeded Simpson as the first lettuce every spring.
Our next question is, do you have any more info about the statistical breakdown of the 100,000 food insecure individuals? Like, for example, how many of those are within the ag reserve or seniors? Or do you know where you could find that information?
That's a little, okay. So I have not found the numbers. Like I said, I think that was probably a January, February number that I had. That came from, I probably have it in my giant pile of papers here, but that number was in Montgomery County. The food, first of all, I should back up. The Food Council is a fantastic and another fantastic resource. So anybody who has any interest to get involved in any of these issues in food insecurity, I highly, highly recommend the Food Council. Wonderful people. They have several different working.
Montgomery County Food Council.
Yeah.
Local Food Council.
Yeah. And they're, first of all, it's fantastically staffed by really good, caring people, but also they have these different working groups that you can be a part of, anybody, and it's all on Zoom. So I'm on like 4 different working groups just in order to learn about, the different activities. There's the food education working group. There's a gardening subcommittee working group. There's the, what is it called? It's FROG, Food and Recovery and Access working group. And then there's the COVID-19 biweekly calls. And I'm just giving those a shout out because they may have a specific more information about that question, like where exactly is the poverty or in the food insecurity in Montgomery County. There is a map on the Food Council website, which shows, well, maybe that was on the Food Council website. It could have also been the, there's a hunger report that had information too. It was a map and it showed you by like red, orange, yellow, where the food insecurity actually pockets are. So I don't have the numbers in my head, but I could follow up with that and send you a link to the map, which gave some indication of that, but I don't have the numbers. A lot of it, I mean, I can tell you off the top of my head that the areas around Gaithersburg, Germantown are really tough. And also then the other bigger pocket is down the Silver Spring, Aspen Hill area has a lot of need. I believe it's much less right where we are, but also the concentration of people is so much less too.
I'm sure the inmate populations are concentrated in the lower income neighborhoods in the county.
Yeah.
Those were the people whose jobs were lost at first.
Yeah.
And in the first flush of the plague.
Yeah. Well, exactly. So obviously there's a link between food insecurity and who had their jobs, and a lot were lost or people's changed during that time. So yeah.
Our next question from the chat is, to participate in donating to the Grow an Extra Row program, do you require a particular soil testing to be done to accept your homegrown produce?
No, it's all good. I mean, this one is really, it's just the community come together, grow what you can. It's just whatever you have would be wonderful to donate. And like I said, you can either drop it off directly over at WAMCA or at the food shed. I should put somebody can put my information in the chat. I can put it in later. So you can also feel free to call me and I can, help. I'm so excited about this program because I think it's a typical grassroots things where people are just coming together to do it. I'm growing, I should show you later, but I have 80 tomato plants in my living room back there. And one of the reasons I grew so many, because I want to just give them to people for the Plant an Extra Row program. So if anybody wants some tomatoes or peppers, I'm growing peppers too. So I just want to give them to people as you grow them. That's one thing. And I should say that too. Sorry, I'm all about the shout outs. The Sugarloaf Citizens Associations is having a plant swap on May 1st, I believe. And here, Sarah Duffin at the Presbyterian Church in the Poolsville Community Garden is also having another plant swap on May 8th. And that one's even more. It's like also backyard, whatever tools and other gardening things that you might have. So May 1st and May 8th is another time to come out and join and talk about gardening, and people will have all those extra vegetables there to sell or give away for free. I mean, the plants. So plant an extra row. You can just pick up a bunch there and stick them in your backyard. And you could even stick them in pots. You can grow tomatoes in pots. You don't need to, put them in a yard if you don't have good yard space. So grow.
Awesome. I put your information in the chat, so if anyone's looking for her number or her email to contact her about that, it's there. Our next question is about the community food shed. So the question is, if I buy one, get another package of strawberries at Giant and don't want the other package, would the community cold shed take the other package?
Oh, good question. It's funny, that has not come up. I've been talking to so many people and it hasn't come up yet, but I mean, the answer is yes, we'll take whatever there is. The idea of it, conceptually is our backyard gardening stuff, but if it's food and it's good food and it's in good shape, sure, we'll take it. But, I would say yes, but the concept is more, let's grow it and do it. But yes, I mean, if there's good food, yep. I mean, if it's shelf stable stuff, I would say, hey, just bring it directly to Wumco or put it in the Pike and Valega thing too that's there. So maybe we would avoid taking shelf stable food, but if it's the fresh produce, then yeah, we'll figure it out. We're learning. It's the first year we're doing it. I have no idea what's going to happen. I just think it's going to work well. So.
Could you describe one more time where it's placed?
Yeah, okay, so it's a bit under construction, I should say that right now. So, the whole locals is, anyway, the whole thing's under construction. So the shed is too. So, if you're familiar with this, so there's the main building, which is really under construction. And then the next building over is the bakery, the actual bakery, where they have the chairs and the tables out. And then the little shed next to it, where right now they're building like this really beautiful stone wall in front. That's where the cold shed is. It's in there. So you would drive, it's basically the third building back when you drive into that driveway. And it's open. You can just walk in. And like I said, it's a little bit, there's some stuff in there and some construction going on, but it's functioning. And it's a very well insulated room, which has an air conditioner, basically. So it's kind of kept cold by an air conditioner. So it's not going to be freezing. It's not for frozen, no frozen stuff, please. It's not going to work. But anything that can, like produce that works with just a cold area is perfect. And so there's one shelf, like the first shelf on the straight back is where the CSA shares for the community farm share are going to be dropped off or are being dropped off. So Madison Fields, which is Sandy and Dave, they grow the food, they make their CSA shares, they drop them off there, and then a volunteer comes and picks up those shares and delivers them. And then two people actually come and pick them up themselves. So that's on the first table. And then the table on the right, we have a little sign that says grow an extra row or plant an extra row. And that's on that table is where you put whatever extra stuff that you have. Oh, I should say too, when you walk in at first, the first part isn't refrigerated. It's like shelves. And right now it's like storage for just, I don't know what all this in there, but there's a lot of stuff. They're going to clean that out and make that all nice. And then the second room is like this green insulation door. Doesn't really have a handle yet, but we'll get there. And that's where the cold shed is. Sorry, it's a little under construction. I think in a week or two, it'll be ready. But so that's why call me if you have any questions, because you'll be like, where am I? Because it's this whole big construction thing, but it's working. So.
Well, thank you for telling us all about it. I know I'm a political local and I haven't heard anything about that, but I know that sounds like such a great program and definitely something that my family would love to contribute to. Our next question is, have you ever contracted with senior housing to buy into CSAS as transportation and mobility to shop for fresh produce is limited for that population?
Wait, can you say it again? So whether their CSA shares would be for the seniors with lower mobility?
So I think the question is asking if the programs that do farm to table or farm to food bank type programs, if any of them have ever contracted with senior housing, since seniors have limited mobility and transportation for fresh produce.
I have not.
Yeah, I haven't either. And I'm not familiar enough with like the other bigger programs. Like I don't know, for example, Meals on Wheels does, you know, and these other programs. So for Community Farm Share, that's a good point to think about for the future. So right now, the way we're connected with families that are looking for the CSA shares is through food assistance providers. So basically, WUMCO was our first one that we worked with, and they, you know, helped us to connect to different families. And then there's like 5 or 6 other food assistance providers in the county that I'm connecting to, and they're just helping me to identify the family. So it's sort of a bit of a, you know, unofficial, not unofficial in the right word, but, you know, like just they know their families and I don't, so we're connecting. And so to be honest, I haven't, for Community Farm Share, I hadn't gotten to, yeah, seniors like that. That's a good point. I don't, and I just don't know, but we could for the future, but I don't know about other, like, you know, other county or other nonprofits, maybe Meals on Wheels, or I do know one, actually. This could be interesting. Like, is there a need like here? Because I have a good friend who's the head of a nonprofit called KindWorks. KindWorks, they're based in Bethesda. Awesome organization, love them too. They just started doing a program called Kind Soup. They call everything kind because that's their thing. So Kind Soup and Kind Casseroles, and they make it so people at home, they get on Zoom, and there's some chef there or somebody that organizes a recipe, and they all cook this stuff, and then they bring it. And so it's a warm, ready-made meal. And they're actually always looking for where to bring it to, because some of the food assistance providers don't even want like home cooked meal because it needs to be all, you know, a certain way, or I don't know, maybe there's a process or regulations or something. I'm not exactly sure. But yeah, let me know if there's a need of getting like prepared soups and casseroles and all they have to do is warm it up. You know, you don't even have to cook anything. They might be able to support that. So let me know.
Yeah, that would be great information. Does anyone else have a question that they'd like to unmute and ask? Now would be the time.
And
Hi, yeah, could I clarify? I asked that last question about senior housing, and actually what I was thinking of is more the fact that we have a lot of independent living seniors in a variety of housing throughout the county. And most of the Meals on Wheels, KindWorks, et cetera, provide X amount of already cooked meals. But what the seniors who are otherwise capable often can't do is get to where they can buy fresh produce. I mean, you can have staples delivered, but I'm thinking further down the road of what would be the win-win for CSAs is if a CSA had, you know, like a housing unit of 50 seniors who bought into them every year. That's also money for the farmers. Right. And but if it's but it feeds seniors who otherwise wouldn't get that fresh apple, those fresh greens. So it's more of a suggestion going forward. I asked in case you already had been involved in that, but that was the thought behind the question, is looking for something to grow CSAs that benefits the population that needs it.
Yeah,
it's a very good suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'll follow that up. There's a new housing development in Rockville. I'm not going to remember the name exactly. I think it's called Main Street. I think it's kind of upscale, but I'm not sure. But anyway, the people who developed it, the thought behind it is it's mixed use housing. It's people of variety of economic background, ages, and physical abilities, deliberately designed for persons who may not have mobility, who may have special needs. So look up Main Street, Rockville. That might be a nice location. People would want to shop from CSAs, and you'd have a lot of people in one place who might have need for assistance and access.
That's the same problem as people who are immobile, who can't get their shots.
Yeah, that's such a great idea, Anne. Thank you for sharing.
Well, we
Do you
want to
have
keep
any
our
more
CSAs
questions?
supported too. So it's a
Yes,
two-way
of
street.
course.
It was interesting. I know that during the pandemic, actually last year, the CSAs did well because people immediately didn't want to go to the groceries, so they did support the CSAs. This year, I've heard it's good. Like they're still selling them, But it's, it's not quite as strong as last year. Like I know 1 Acre Farm still has a bunch of shares, so you can go buy from 1 Acre. I know they're still open. A few others I think are full, but like I think Feed the Rainbow might be full by now, but I don't remember them all. But yeah, yes.
That's what I was just going to ask, is how to find a good CSA. Mark, I already asked about yours way back when I talked to Jenny, and she said you were long gone unavailable.
Well, it's a question of how much I can raise.
Right.
A number of my members are participating in what I call a work option. They come and work at the farm. And there are a lot of benefits. They learn from that. They feel that they participate. The biggest shortage, in my understanding, is in small farms, is the time of the farmer. And the only way you can extend that resource is by giving up sleep. And I think the biggest problem for small farming in the county over the years has been labor. And the county, to my understanding, has never raised an inch about it to address that problem. To have sign-up lists and training. It is the devil's work to find anyone who can do good. And you have to be perfect, if I may say that. When the customer is coming, that bag has to be full. One time in all my years, I got the schedule mixed up, and a couple came up to the house and I didn't have their bag ready, and I have suffered torments for that. Those years, there's very little margin for error. The difference between the success and planting can be 1/4 of an inch.
That's true. And just off the top of my head, the labor issue, which is so true. Part of the problem there is, again, is the affordability of housing. And so I think there's something going on now in the county, maybe it's passed or was it going to pass, but about having these accessory buildings where people, like workers, can live on farms. I think for a while that wasn't allowed. Now I think they are maybe opening that up, but don't quote me on that. Sorry, I have always a little half nuggets of information and nothing is fully baked. But the housing has been a problem because people can't afford, basically the typical rent in Montgomery County average is $35,000, and if their whole wage that they're going to get at most from a farm is $36,000. It's just not going to work. So there's definitely a problem on the labor side.
There are these fundamental structural problems that, for all the wind and noise, I don't think Montgomery County has ever addressed in a serious manner. Labor and training and worker access to the farms, and access to seniors who don't have their own transportation. There's got to be a way that we can get the food to them. It doesn't happen in a very large scale, to my understanding.
Well, I think what you guys are doing locally with WUMCO is wonderful. The combination of what both of you are involved in, along with WUMCO, and meeting the needs of, fresh vegetables and fresh fruit is great, because everybody likes that. Everybody wants that. We can't all live on canned vegetables. So it's really nice to get the fresh produce when it's in season.
I'm so excited about it. It's been one of these really heartwarming things. Almost every week, because we have the first 6 shares have already started to go out. Again, partnered with WUMCO, and they helped us to make those connections. I love them over there. And I get a little text message almost every week from one of the ladies that picks up the food. And she says, "This is what I'm having. This is what I made for the kids." And she's like, "I never would have had that ability to." I know. I'm like, it's just so amazing to really especially in our community, like we're so close here and it just matters. And it's been really touching to be able to be that connector of, and it's not like I'm doing it, right? It's like the community is doing that.
Yeah.
People just came together and said, you know, at first when I sent out the email to like try to, you know, get some donations and stuff, it's like my mom, who lives in Ohio, by the way, you know, like people, and like, how does this work? And then slowly by slowly, people, you know, the word comes out and people, it starts to spread, and it's just about making things happen. And I think it's just neat to be part of a community that believes in helping each other.
One of the real satisfactions for the farmer, I can speak as the farmer, is the dialogue you get into with the members and the reactions that you went, and a lot of questions are, what is that stuff? Putting a little side on things, and a little word it uses to be cooked or raw. A good number of my CSA members this year live in a nearby very low income community. And I'm very interested in working with that to give it special attention to make it work especially well. Just a little philosophy. One thing this country hasn't come to grips with is that not every American has access to an automobile that runs. And you need that in order to get to healthcare, in order to get food. You need that for an awful lot of things, and not everyone knows how to use one of these machines we're working on right now.
That's why it's at my house.
That's true.
He's really good at email. But good.
The answer to that is to have a son who's a computer wizard.
That always helps to have a younger generation to help with that.
Yeah.
For sure. That's one of the things, one of our issues with the senior center, Poolesville Seniors, that we've been trying to tackle is, you know, how to get people on some of our programs that aren't computer savvy or, you know, have that technology, because we offer wonderful programs that can help people that are shut in at home or, you know, not wanting to go out because of COVID, but trying to get them on the technology has been a real challenge. So, but we thank you guys so much for coming tonight.